You open this door with the key of reason. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of truth. A dimension of freedom. A dimension of joy. You're moving into the land of both the ideal and the real, of the possible and the actual. You've just crossed over into the Capitalist Corner.
Where reason meets reality, welcome to the Capitalist Corner.
Welcome to this special episode of the Capitalist Corner. I'm your host, Michael Liebowitz, and with us today is Blake Ashby. He is the president of the Democratic Township in Ferguson, Missouri. Is that correct, Blake? Did I state that right?
You did. Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
So Blake commented a couple months back on a post I made on TikTok. And we've been trying to get the time where we could have a friendly debate about democratic capitalism. And we finally were able to hook up, and we're going to have it today. It's going to be very informal. Blake's going to get 10 minutes to make his case for why we should be supporting democratic capitalism. I'll take 10 minutes or so to respond, and then we'll just have a friendly back and forth where we don't interrupt. That's the plan, and I think we could stick to it. And don't forget, audience members, we do accept super chats and super stickers. Thank you very much. And without further ado, Blake, take it away. Why should we be advocating for democratic capitalism?
All right. And the starting point is we have democratic capitalism right now. If you go back to the 1930s, when a lot of the world was debating the extremes of state socialism with the government controlling every aspect of the economy, and laissez-faire capitalism, where the government had no role in the economy, President Roosevelt took a middle path. We stuck with the free market, but we used the power of democracy to moderate capitalism, to make sure that everybody benefited from the system, everybody had a chance to participate, and most critically, everybody lived by the same set of rules. And that is why we have the largest economy in the world, because our government took steps to make sure that the fruits of capitalism were shared broadly throughout society. Things like minimum wage laws, things like support for unionization. But it's not just wages, it's also spending power. So public education, public roads, making sure there are free broadcasts, making sure the post office works. All of those things make it possible for more members of our society to participate in our capitalist system. So once again, we didn't end the free market. We didn't end private ownership of property, because that ultimately does prove to be the most efficient means of allocating capital. But we did ensure that capitalism worked for everybody, and we protected against its impulse toward monopolization, for example, and its impulse to drive wages down. So it was a step back from pure capitalism, but this is the truth, is that unmoderated capitalism is not necessarily self-sustaining because it tends to consume itself. Moderated capitalism ensures we have consumers, and by ensuring we have consumers, then we also make sure our capitalist economy has the income, the resources to continue to churn. Henry Ford said it famously. The reason he gave people $5 an hour was so they could afford to buy his cars. And we've got those same questions here today. We talk about automation. Well, if we automate everything, how do people get money to actually buy things? So part of what happened is democratic capitalism won. We had a moderated society. We had a Securities and Exchange Commission. We had lots of regulations that made sure we all benefited from our society, from capitalism. But when the Soviet Union collapsed, everybody thought, oh, history's over. And this idea of triumphant capitalism came to be. And it was, well, our economy is more mature now. We don't need as much regulation. They can self-regulate. Just the competition alone is going to keep prices down. And so the Republican Party, the people that believed in laissez-faire economics, they didn't necessarily go away. They found a home in the right wing of the Republican Party. And in fairness, the people that believed in socialism found a home in the left wing of the Democratic Party. So it wasn't just the Republicans. The Democrats had their share of extremism also. But so starting with Reagan, they have worked assiduously to dismantle as much of that regulatory state as possible. And it's kind of like the Hemingway line, how did you go bankrupt? Two ways, gradually, then suddenly. They have gradually chipped away at the protections that made our country more accessible and more successful. And now we've reached the Trump stage, and Trump with the with the Congress kind of checking out, is doing whatever he wants and dismantling regulatory structures left and right. But ultimately, the answer for our country is we need to get back to realistic regulation. And I can point to regulation that was not good, not realistic. Our Sarbanes-Oxley SOX was a terrible bill, just to pick one example. But it is possible to regulate society. It is possible to ensure everybody benefits, and it is possible to do what we can to assure broad prosperity in our country as a precursor, not just for capitalism, but for individual freedom. And I don't think that was 10 minutes, but that's probably a pretty good stopping point.
Thanks, Blake. Okay, so to start with, your premise is that at the time of Roosevelt, they had to, there was a debate in the country whether to stick with laissez-faire capitalism or go to socialism. And Roosevelt kind of came and said, we're going to do a middle road. We're going to have what you call democratic capitalism. First of all, that's a tremendous myth because it implies that there was free market capitalism pre-Roosevelt. There certainly was not. This is not my own invention. I can read here. This is from ChatGPT, but you can certainly go and Google and look in any history book you want. Hoover was not a free market ideologue. He believed in something called associationism, although he was not for direct transfers. He had public works programs, the Hoover Dam project that was expanded, support for federal and state works. He supported farmers through agricultural support. There was the Reconstruction Finance Corporation was put in by Hoover. Of course, we had the Smoot-Hawley tariff put in by Hoover. He, of course, also put pressure on companies not to lower wages below market rates. It wasn't maybe as much as what Roosevelt ended up doing, but it certainly was not a hands-off, laissez-faire approach that Hoover put forward. The next thing you said was that FDR, we had the most economic growth in the history of the country. If you look between, and I stopped at 80 because that's when Reagan took over. If you look from between 1940 and 1980 is not actually the fastest, the most growth we've had in the country's history. That actually took place between 1865 and 1900. Now, you talked about that there's been this push to deregulate. So let me just go over some facts with you. There has never in the history of this country been a 4-year presidential term where at the end of that term, there was less economic regulation than there was at the beginning. There's never been a presidential term in the history of this country where Medicare and Medicaid were less available at the end or available with less benefits at the end of the 4-year term than there was at the beginning. There's never been less access to Social Security or where Social Security benefits were less at the beginning of a 4-year term, at the end of a 4-year term than there were at the beginning. There's never been a 4-year presidential term at the end of which the financial sector was less regulated than it was at the beginning. There's never been a 4-year presidential term where the banking sector was less regulated at the end of the 4-year term than it was at the beginning. There has never been a 4-year term where the housing market was less regulated at the end of a 4-year term than it was at the beginning. And there's never been a 4-year term where unemployment benefits were less available at the end of that 4-year term than there were at the beginning, excluding emergency situations. Now, when it comes to things like welfare and food stamps, it gets a little dicier. But I don't think that's really what you're talking about. You wrote an article where you talked about the constitutional promise of equality of opportunity. There's no such promise of equality of opportunity in the Constitution. When it comes to Republicans that are advocating for laissez-faire, I would simply say, where are they? Reagan drove up the debt. Reagan also supported tariffs, and Reagan implemented tax reform that was certainly not laissez-faire later on in his second term. George W. Bush, Medicare Part D, Medicare Part D, also drove up the debt, wanted to establish the homeowners society, with that sort of thing that had nothing to do with free market economics. Trump calls himself tariff man, has said he will not cut into Medicare and Medicaid. His vice president just at TPUSA talked about how, Medicare and Medicaid have to be saved for Americans. That's who it's there for. Trump has also bought interest in private companies. Hardly a laissez-faire guy. So now, if you talk about raising minimum wages, if you raise the minimum wage, all you do is price out people out of the market. So you're going to cause unemployment in the lower sectors, the very people that you're trying to help. So that would be a problem with that. And the idea that the economy grew because of Roosevelt's policies actually extended the Great Depression longer than any depression we ever had in the history of this country. If you juxtapose the Great Depression with the Depression, for instance, under Harding, where they kept hands off, that depression lasted, I think, about 18 months. Roosevelt, the depression lasted, ultimately until after World War II. So I don't know how you say that Roosevelt's policies did this. It's true, there was robust growth in the 1950s. There were also a lot of young men returning home from war. So and also you had the Federal Reserve manipulating the money supply, ultimately leading to the stagflation that we would have in the 70s, where Friedrich Hayek was actually surprised it was able to last that long. But none of what you said took monetary policy into effect. The fact of the matter is that the economy grew in spite of those policies, not because of them. Capitalism happens to be robust, but beyond the strict utilitarian measures that you're talking about, the biggest problem that I see here is that all that you've advocated calls for the initiation of force. You're calling for the federal government to implement policies where they compel people to do certain things at the point of a gun. Metaphorical though it may be, if the people refuse to comply, then the federal government would turn that metaphorical gun into a real one. I don't think that if you had to be the one wielding the gun in any of those instances, you would be able to do it. I don't think most people would be able to do it. And so that's my biggest beef with what you're talking about, is all of it is predicated on the initiation of force on the part of the government. And to me, that is immoral, should not be done. And not to mention the fact that most of what you've advocated goes way beyond what the Constitution would allow. So with that said, I don't need 10 minutes either, Blake. I'll just allow you to reply and we can have some back and forth.
Well, so let's start with a fundamental question, all right? Does government give freedom or take freedom? And what's the answer?
Neither.
Government doesn't give freedom. Government doesn't take freedom.
The government should do neither. The government should protect freedom.
I didn't say.
You're asking me a factual question of what does it do in practice?
Does government give freedom or take freedom?
In practice, the government is entirely too big and has been taking freedom more and more, well beyond what the Constitution allows.
So perfect. What's an example of a freedom that government has taken from you personally?
From me personally, the freedom to keep my own money. They take my money in the form of taxes.
So they take your money in the form of taxes. Is a restaurant that takes your money stealing from you?
No, the restaurant it's a voluntary arrangement between me and the restaurant. I choose to go to that restaurant. They tell me what their price is, and then I choose whether I want to pay or not. I do not have that option with the government.
But you have to eat somewhere, right?
I could buy food and eat
somewhere. So it's not that restaurant, it's a different restaurant, or you give your money to the grocery store. Right?
Or I could go hunting and kill food and eat it myself, or have a garden and do it that way.
You'd have to buy tools. So my point is, you don't have the option of not eating, right? And so when you go to a restaurant, that doesn't mean you're coerced into going to a restaurant. That means that nature fundamentally forces you to need nutrition, and you have to get that nutrition somewhere, right?
You're talking about two different things, Blake.
No,
you're talking about one. You're talking about one that is a metaphysical fact, that human beings require nutrition in order to eat.
Correct.
In order to survive. And therefore,
If I don't eat,
no,
I die.
no, it's not.
No,
You're,
how is that not coercion?
because coercion is something that people do, not something that nature does. That's why.
Oh, so only people can coerce.
By definition, yeah.
Why is that?
Because that's what the differentiator is. I mean, I didn't invent it. There's a distinction between what people do by what comes natural, what's in nature, the fact that I have to eat, the fact that I have to maintain a certain temperature in order to survive. Those are metaphysical facts. Coercion is when one person or group of people forces another group of people to do something.
Okay, so
they're fundamentally different.
You're saying that it's not coercion when nature, a landslide takes your house away. Right?
No.
But it is coercion when a group of people take your house away.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one is subject to choice and one isn't. The people that are choosing to coerce me are making a choice.
Eating is not subject to choice.
No. That's my point, is that the people that are coercing me are making a choice to do so. Nature is not making a choice to do so. It just happens to be a metaphysical fact that this is what occurs.
Okay.
The two are not commensurate. They're not the same thing.
But so if
not comparable.
Okay, that's fine. But so coercion is the key, right? You're saying that taxes are coercion, but going to a restaurant is not coercion, if I understood you correctly.
Yes.
Okay. Why are taxes coercion?
Because the government tells me that if I don't pay the taxes, they're going to put me in jail.
Or no, you just have to leave, right? Just like the restaurant. If you don't want to pay the cost of a restaurant, you can leave that restaurant. Could you not leave the United States if you didn't like our tax policy?
Well, no, because I can't afford it. That's one. So no, I can't just up and leave. No.
You're saying you don't have enough money to drive across the border.
Secondly, you're telling me to go somewhere else where somebody else is going to threaten me and take my money. You're not addressing the fundamental difference in that nature is not threatening me. Nature's not making a choice. The government
isn't threatening you?
No, nature doesn't issue threats, sir. Nature is what actually is. Government is the function of choice, human choices. They're threatening me with incarceration if I do not pay their taxes. That's coercion. The restaurant is not doing that to me. There's a fundamental distinction.
But so let me make sure I understand, right? So nature, even though nature might starve you to death, flood you out, have a mountain lion killing, that's not coercion, correct?
No, it's not. I mean, you can look up the word. This is I don't know
things you didn't want to do. It's still not coercion.
No, because what you're talking about are metaphysical facts of life that I have to adjust to. As a human being living in a natural environment, nature has things that must be met in order for me to survive. Government agents are making a choice to rob me. Nature cannot act immorally. People can.
All right. That's
can
fine.
people answer me that? Answer me that. Can nature act immorally?
No.
Can people?
Yes.
Okay, so if I am going to starve to death, there's no moral implication for nature. Nature's not doing anything wrong.
Nature doesn't give a damn about you.
Okay, if you come and put a gun to my head and take my wallet, are you acting immorally?
Absolutely.
Okay, so does government not consist of people, of human beings that are making decisions?
Step back though, right? Because what you said, I asked you a question, which you did not answer. We kind of answered, right? I said,
I did absolutely answer it.
Take freedom, and you said government takes freedom.
Yeah, I said as a matter of fact, it does. I said in an ideal state, government would be protecting my freedom.
And so is there no situation in your mind where government gives freedom?
No, it does not give freedom.
All right, well, so here's an easy example. We all give up our right to drive on the left-hand side of the road, right? Government takes the freedom to drive on the left-hand side of the road so that we can get to where we're going elsewhere. Because the reality is that government takes freedom to give freedom, and we all make that compromise. We all agree not to drive on you did agree to not drive on the left-hand side of the road, or do you only not drive on the left-hand side of the road because you might get a ticket?
I don't drive on the side of the road because I don't want to crash. The government doesn't have to tell me to do that. And if the roads were properly privately owned, the private owners would establish what they wanted to happen on their roads, and I would abide by it because I don't want to crash. That's not the government giving me a freedom.
Okay, but so you're saying that if it's a privately owned road, it would be morally acceptable for them to tell you to drive on the left-hand side of the road or on the right-hand side of the road. But if it's a publicly owned road, it's not morally acceptable for the government to tell you to drive on the right-hand side of the road?
What I'm saying is it's not morally acceptable for the government to force me to pay for those roads. If it were a privately owned road, I would have the choice whether to patronize a given road, and I would have the choice whether I wanted to pay for it. And then by paying for it, I would be agreeing to terms. I don't have that option with the government.
Okay, but no, let's take it back around to nature, right? The key phrase was, I don't have a choice. That's what you said. Nature doesn't.
I said nature doesn't. I said nature doesn't have the choice.
Okay, understood. Okay, and do you know what the first regulatory agency was in the United States?
If I had a guess, I would say it's probably the Bank of the United States, but I'm not positive.
What's his name? Jackson got rid of that. It was the Interstate Commerce Commission. And do you know why that was? Because
I believe it came into being as a part of a compromise in order for Rutherford B. Hayes to win an election.
Definitely layers to it. Not but so what was happening was the government funded an intercontinental railroad, right?
Yeah.
And if you were a big producer and you could afford to ship things to California, the railroads gave you a great price. If you were a small farm and you needed to order a plow from Sears Roebuck, just to pick an example, they would charge you the cost of sending it to San Francisco and then back to Kansas. So you can say, well, that farmer had the option of not buying that plow, but the reality is the farmer did not have the option of not buying that plow and being able to live. And so, like it or not, the government coerced rail companies into charging everybody the same rate. So is that government extending freedom to small farmers or taking freedom from Union Pacific?
It's government absolutely initiating force, but let's back up a little bit into the actual nature of the transcontinental railroads. And why don't we compare James J. Hill's railroad, which was not aided by government, which had far less corruption, was a better running railroad at better prices, and compare that with the ones that the government used coercion to fund. The problem is the government shouldn't have been screwing around with railroads to begin with. The government shouldn't have been involved in that from the get-go. So then the government creates one problem, and then you say, oh, look, but the government's going to provide freedom when they initiate force over here. They should have never been involved in it to begin with. But none of this is telling me how you were but say that again.
You don't think government should build roads at all?
No, I do not.
So
and there were private roads.
Road?
Hold on. The idea that I don't think the government should be producing restaurants either, but you're taking us far afield from the original topic. The original topic was that we should be advocating democratic capitalism. You made claims. You said that that prior to Roosevelt, there was laissez-faire. That's false. There was not. You said that it absolutely is false that there was laissez-faire capitalism prior to Roosevelt. It's absolutely false. And anybody in the audience and you too can do a simple Google search and find out if Herbert Hoover was a laissez-faire capitalist. He absolutely was not. That's the first thing. Then you said that they've been chipping away at regulations ever since, I think you said Reagan. That's also false. It's just not true. Anybody in the audience, again, I will go over this again. There has never been a 4-year presidential term at the end of which there was less economic regulation than there was at the beginning.
Okay.
And that applies to
right there. Wait.
Yeah.
The measure of that is by the number of pages of the Federal Registry, correct?
There's a couple different, that's one of them. But there's several. I don't remember every single means of measuring it. What I do know is that legislation and regulations grow. They do not reduce. That is again.
But
okay.
Recognize. Hold on a second here. Wait a minute. But so yes, the size of the Federal Register has grown almost every year. But to lessen regulation, it just takes one tiny line to negate something, right? Or the government choosing not to do something. So here's an example, right? Why do you think that CEO salaries went from 20 times workers' wages to 300 times workers' wages? What was the economic driver for that?
That specific thing, I have no idea, nor do I care. What I'm telling you and what anybody can look up, but it's irrelevant to the conversation.
It's not
fact of the matter. It is
regulation that led to income inequality.
You are making an argument. First of all, I don't care about income inequality. If inequality is fine with me, people are unequal. People are unequal in their talents, their abilities, their skills, their willingness to put in effort, the choices that they make. So I don't care if there's income inequality. That is not a prima facie showing that we need to get, regulate something. But beyond that, my claim is not there's never been a cut in regulation. My claim is simply that on net, there's never been a 4-year period, meaning by a presidential term. That's what I'm talking about, the beginning of a term, end of the term, where there has been less regulations at the end than there were at the beginning. It is a myth that we are deregulating the economy. It's simply not happening. It did not happen under Trump. It did not happen under Reagan.
Happening.
Well, again,
if you can point to something, I can point to specific examples of regulations that were ended or relaxed. You can point to the size of the Federal Registry. But the fact that the Federal Registry got bigger every year doesn't mean we didn't deregulate specific things.
Okay. Again, all I'm going to say is anybody can Google this on every metric I've said. I mean, but again, hold on. What I'm saying is go and Google. No, when I say talking about metrics, I'm talking about the economic regulations, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, financial sector, banking sector, housing market. Anybody can go and Google this. This is not a tough thing. The same thing with Hoover. But beyond that, because you and I are not going to agree on that, I want to know why it's okay in your mind for the government of the United States to initiate force against its citizens in order to do the type of things that you want it to do.
Okay. And so we are back to that. Does government give freedom or take freedom? And the reality is that government gives freedom by taking freedom. The government takes from us our right to drive on the left-hand side of the road. And in exchange, we have the freedom to get to where we're going faster. So is it coercion that the government doesn't let me drive on the left-hand side of the road? Yes or no?
It's coercion that the government takes your money to pay for the road.
No. You're avoiding my question. I'm not. The road is already there. Let's say, hold on a second. Roads are paid for by communities, right? And while we didn't choose to put that road there, somebody at some point did. Right? Somebody 100 years ago said, we need a road there. Let's get some money together in our community and let's pay for it. So that period of time created a road, right? With their money, not our money. They chose to do that voluntarily. And now 50 years later.
Who chose to do it voluntarily?
The people in the subdivision that chose to pave the road.
The people in a subdivision.
Roads that are created in this country. Wait. You realize most roads that were created in this country were created by private developers and then turned over to subdivisions. They were not created by the government.
Okay. Who's paying for them?
The people in the community.
Okay. Is everybody consenting to have their money taken for that?
At least 51%.
Okay. So the 49% that are being compelled to do it, that's my problem.
Why is that a problem?
Scenario? Because it's a problem for me that people initiate force against others to take their money for things those people don't want to pay for. You see that crystal clearly in the case of you going to commit a robbery. But for some reason, when you vote for guys in suits to take votes, in the chamber of Congress or in their local municipalities, for some reason, then it becomes okay in your mind. It doesn't in mine. And I want to know why you think that's moral to do.
I'm stunned that you're worried about the 6% we pay in taxes compared to all of the other challenges in the world. The fact of the matter is that the fact that somebody at some point, they got together as a group and the consensus was, let's do this. But the reality of taxes is not everybody likes how every dollar of their tax money is spent. I like some things, I don't like other things. We have the ability to opt out at the societal level. If a person didn't want to live in a subdivision that had paved roads, they could have moved. Just like in nature, if nature is coercing you with a landslide, you can move. All right. So what you're saying is that no civil society is possible unless there's 100% unanimity on everything. No civil society is possible unless every single person agrees with every single action.
That actually wasn't what I said. What I'm saying is quite simple. It is immoral to initiate force against somebody else. That's what I'm saying to you. Now you say, well, the subdivision, it's a 6% tax. Okay, then you have local, state, property, federal. There's an abundance of taxes that people are paying. It's not just 6%. There's taxes all over the place. That there's capital gains tax, corporate tax, whatever you want. In any instance of that happening, you're talking about an initiation of force that's taking place, and you have yet to tell me why it's okay to initiate force against other people. But that's
because, and I keep saying back to you, if somebody has the ability to voluntarily opt out by leaving, then it's not force. Just like you say, nature cannot coerce people because people can
Hold on a
decide to
second.
get out of the floodplains. I'm telling you, if somebody doesn't like the fact that there are roads in their subdivision, they can choose to move somewhere else.
Can they? So your average poor person, every poor person in the country can just get up and move and go someplace else. And by the way, wherever they go, they're going to run into the same problem because there's not
there are governments everywhere
that are
you mean
doing the
there's
same
no
thing.
ideal state where there's no government? I just can't believe that.
Hold on. Wait a second. That does not justify the initiation of force.
You keep saying initiation of force
because
as
that's
if
what
somebody
it is.
brings a gun over to these people's houses and say, hey, if you want to drive on our roads, you've got to pay us money.
If they will not pay their taxes, that's precisely what will happen. Yeah.
Yeah, eventually.
Men will show up with guns. Yes.
Eventually, after many years.
But that's
why
the threat.
should those people get to use something for free when the rest of us have to pay for it? How is that not robbery to not pay your taxes?
Because none of us should have to pay for it if we don't choose to.
We have this obligation to find food every day that nature forced on us. Aren't we human beings part of nature? Didn't we naturally come to the idea that civil society is absent civil society? It's nasty, brutish, and short.
Listen, first of all, I'm not Thomas Hobbes, number one. Secondly, I'm not arguing that there should be no government. What I'm arguing against is coercive taxation, the government forcing people to pay for things that they may not want. The government, if you are born here, you are born here from the time you're old enough to go shopping. So if I'm 10 and I have no option, I can't leave, and I go to Burger King, I'm paying taxes. That's compulsion. That's coercion. It's the initiation of
your parents'
force.
money, though, and they made a choice to go to Burger King. But as you said yourself,
not necessarily. I used to go to Burger King without it, but it's irrelevant. They're initiating force, and you can't get around that. You can try to come and say anything you want. Well, you can leave this, that, and the other. Well, first of all, it's not that easy. But secondly, wherever I go, they're going to do it. And why should I? So basically what you're telling me then is the government is forcing me to leave, which is just more initiation of force.
Is that you're using a government service just like you use a restaurant. And for some strange reason, people don't get upset when they have to pay for the food they consume, but they
because it's voluntary.
For the roads they use. What's that?
Because it's voluntary.
It's not voluntary. You have to eat. You said so yourself.
But the problem here, Blake, is you simply don't know what words mean.
Oh, I know exactly what they mean.
You really don't.
Trying to suggest that civil society is possible without a democratically appointed or approved tax. You're saying that unless I personally agree to every tax being paid, I shouldn't have to pay it.
What I'm saying is nobody should be forced to pay for something they don't want. No one.
But should they be forced to pay for things they use?
Well, the problem here comes because you put me in a situation where I basically have to use these things.
No, you don't. You can go somewhere else. Just like with nature, you don't have to get
where
eaten by the lion. You can leave. Well, that's my point.
Blake,
don't you understand? You're talking about this mythical society. Oh,
no,
in the ideal world, there's no coercion.
No, I'm not. I'm not.
Part of life that does not involve some kind of coercion.
Blake, I'm not arguing any such thing. All I'm saying to you is simple, that every single thing that you are advocating requires coercion. Then you do the switch and go to nature, but nature cannot coerce. Voluntary action does not mean unlimited action. It does not mean I can flap my arms and fly to the moon if I want to. What it means is that I can make choices without being coerced by other people. That's what voluntary action means.
Not nature.
Yeah, that's what the words mean. And it's simple. It's because, as you stated, nature cannot act morally or immorally. People can. And if an individual committing a robbery is unethical, I don't care if it's 2, I don't care if it's 4, 8, 10,000. If robbery is immoral, I don't care how many people you get together to commit the robbery, it's still robbery.
But that's because you keep saying that democratically approved taxation is robbery.
I'm saying that the initiation of force is robbery.
No, I'm just asking a simple question. Is a tax passed in a democratic? So if you voted against a tax, it is immoral for you to have to pay that tax.
It's immoral for anybody to have to pay a tax they don't want to pay.
Okay, but
it's that simple.
You're clearly using electricity, right? Do you want to pay that tax or not?
What do you mean?
I mean, we have this power system that was built by taxes, right? It was a combination of taxes and then direct payments. So
Okay.
my point is, you pay a bunch of different taxes every day. You must be doing that voluntarily. You must voluntarily use electricity. So what's an example of something that you don't
So here's
use,
the
but you have
problem.
to pay for?
Here's the
What's something
problem.
you
You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of the squeegee guy. When I used to drive to New York, a guy comes with a squeegee, washes your windows, and then says, hey, you used my service. You have to pay me for it. The fact that the government has usurped roads, has usurped the electrical grid, has usurped all kinds of powers. Of course
Where do
they
you
did.
think roads came from?
Well, initially private developers.
Yeah, in subdivisions by
initially private developers, but the idea that there could not be roads without government is laughable. That's the first thing. But
okay, what's your example?
What you were saying
that has roads without government. Let's bring it back to the real world. What's an example?
Prior to the government building all the roads, there were private roads.
Well, there's still private
in America.
Roads.
There were private roads
in America.
Yeah.
Right?
And now your argument is that if the government didn't build the interstate highways, that nobody would have done it if it were all privately owned. And then you say, okay, the government has done it. The government has done everything. Of course, I can't do anything. Very little can I do without having it involved with the government somehow. That doesn't make it right. The fact that the government initiated force to build roads, and now to get anywhere, if I'm going to survive, I have to use roads, does not then mean that it's okay for them to tax me to pay for those roads. Privatize it. Allow. What choice do I have? If I walk outside my house right now to go anywhere, I have to cross a road.
Well,
those are government roads.
Of society, isn't it? Right? Because it's an old saying, right? But your right to swing your fist ends at my nose. Your right to use things for free that I paid for ends at my nose, right? We all have paid for these roads. You use these roads. You say, oh, well, I use these under moral protest. This is my challenge in talking to libertarians, right? Because they talk about these abstract things, but I have yet to hear a libertarian point to another country that had a regulatory environment that they accepted.
So what?
So
there was a time. Hold on.
It only happens in your dreams. It doesn't actually happen.
Hold on. There was a time when a constitutional republic was only in the dreams of some guys named Jefferson, Washington, Hamilton, Madison, but yet that came to be because they advocated for what they thought was the right thing to do. There's been plenty of societal change and plenty of government change. The idea, well, this doesn't currently exist. Okay, so because tyrannical governments exist, we should never fight against them because that's what is. But the question is, do you understand that you are advocating the initiation of force and won't stop?
You call it force. I call it democracy.
What is democracy if it's not force?
Democracy is when a group of people get together and say, okay, we've got 100 people. We've got 100 different opinions. Can we agree on one opinion for one thing?
Okay.
That's what I'm calling it.
And they can't. And then you're saying that if 51% of those people agree that they should enslave the other 49%, it's okay because a majority has voted for it.
No, didn't say anything about fundamental rights.
Well, hold on. Wait a second. Hold on. Why is slavery wrong? Tell me.
Because each individual has agency, and taking the agency away from somebody else is morally wrong.
But taking the agency away from a person on how that person wants to spend his or her money, that's okay. Because the majority voted for it.
No.
So it's a matter of degree in your mind.
That person can choose not to be part of that collective. They can choose not to be part. If I'm in small town Kansas and somebody says, we need to pave this road, and I say, I think it's stupid to pave the roads. It's just going to bring a bunch of carpetbaggers. I'm not down for that. They have the ability to go to a different part of small town Kansas where there aren't paved roads.
So they should be forced to leave then. Basically,
you're saying you say people should have the benefits of society without paying for the cost.
No,
I'm
not saying that at all.
You are absolutely saying that.
No, I'm actually I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that it's Carpenter's Hall.
Carpenter's Hall. Did you pay for Carpenter's Hall?
What?
You're using Carpenter's Hall as a backdrop.
I'm using a picture.
We benefit from society. Right? We all benefit from society. It's not unreasonable for society to ask us to pay the bills for society. Why is it
Okay.
so unreasonable to pay for the things we use?
Blake, this is why. I will say this to you a thousand times until you get it. I'm not saying people shouldn't pay for the things they use. I'm saying the government should not force people to pay to build things and then force people to pay to use those things. It's all wrong. From the get-go, the government should not be forcing people through taxation to pay for things.
Wait. But you said the government force, and that implies there was not a democratic decision behind that, because the government didn't force our country. The government didn't force our country to build a national highway system. Congress, democracy, voted to do it. So you
hold on a second.
There's no people behind
the government. Hold on a second. The government didn't take people's houses in order to do that. That didn't happen. Okay. So you just said the government
was a government decision. It was a democratic decision.
Except for the homeowners.
Is government an extension of the people or not?
Listen, no, not necessarily. No,
people or not.
No.
So your government is not reflective of you.
No.
And so
it's not.
So, but what about? But there must be a majority in your area that has voted for a government.
Okay. So does majority dictate morality?
No. But
why not?
Majority.
Why not? So if me and 5 of my friends are out at a restaurant and you're there and we decide you're a part of our group and we're going to compel you to pay for our dinner, that's the majority deciding. Why is that wrong?
Because we didn't vote ahead of time that one person would pay for that whole meal. Whereas
we voted. We voted. Me and my friends voted.
We all voted ahead of time. We're going to pick one person.
No. Yeah, my friends and me all voted.
Well,
decided we were going to pay.
Did I have the right to vote?
Who cares? What difference does that make?
Because democracy. So you're saying this is where it gets a little sketchy for you, right? Because
you could go to a different restaurant.
Absolutely.
When you get there, there's going to be 5, and then 5 people there can compel you.
I can go to a different restaurant. If I think
and then 5 people can compel you,
I don't have to go to that restaurant.
And then if you get to another restaurant and 5 people again do the same thing, in every restaurant you go to, that's going to happen.
What is your comparison? So you're saying that
government,
because there's already
government does that exact thing, Blake.
Okay, but
every
so
government you go, that's going to happen.
When I move to a new region, I've got to pay the taxes of that region. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, everywhere you go.
Didn't I voluntarily move there? Didn't I voluntarily move that region?
Everywhere you go, there's going to be a government to force you to do something.
Okay, but that's a different question. My question
is not a different question.
If I voluntarily move to a region, does that mean I voluntarily accepted their tax policy?
No.
Why not?
It does not. Because you have no choice. That's like saying, listen, anywhere you go, someone's going to put a gun to your head and take your wallet. So now I said, well, fuck it. I'm going to go over here in South Windsor, Connecticut, because when the guy robs me, he's not going to take all my money. And then you said, oh, look, it was voluntary. You volunteered to go to South Windsor. I volunteered to get away from coercion to the best of my ability, but no matter what, I couldn't get away from it.
So and that's what you're talking about. You think civil society is inherently coercive?
No, I think that the government that you support,
civil society with 100% agreement on every fact, is inherently coercive at some level.
No, they don't have to agree on everything. What I'm saying to you is that anytime somebody compels somebody to pay for something they don't want, they're initiating force, and that's immoral. I've said the same thing at least 50 times, I think.
But I don't understand. You keep saying they don't want, but they use. And I keep coming back with, well, they use those things. Why shouldn't they have to pay for it?
Because these things were built from the start by taking from people. Everything you're talking about is built on coercion. I'm saying we should stop coercing.
That's not true. They voluntarily decided to do a U.S. highway system.
They didn't. Yes, Blake, you're so Blake. They did. So the people whose house were taken, they volunteered?
No, but they are part of civil society.
Okay,
and
hold on. So then they didn't volunteer.
Congress, right? Our highest elected body, democratically decided to create a highway system.
Blake, okay, so do majorities determine what's right and wrong? Yes or no?
Majorities determine what the society as a whole is going to do.
That's not what I asked you.
Right and wrong. This is not a moral question. It's a financial question.
No, it's an absolutely moral question. My argument is simple. It's immoral to initiate force. And you agree.
But then you keep defining using a road as force. You define driving on the right-hand side of the road as an example of force.
Blake, what I'm saying to you is whenever the government threatens you to pay money for something you don't want to pay for, it's the initiation of force. That's what I'm saying.
And I am telling you that in a civil society, we have to figure out how to work together and live together. And we all give up a little bit of some freedom so that we have other freedoms. We all get the right to drive on the left-hand side of the road so we can get to where we're going faster.
Wait a second. But that could happen voluntarily, Blake. I don't need the government to compel that.
You don't think
I can voluntarily do that?
You don't really think that if we had no police that we would not, there would be no need for traffic?
That's not what I that hold on.
Sure, it seemed like what you said.
No, what I'm saying to you again, for you made this claim that you understood libertarians, which by the way, I am not one. So
I didn't make that claim directly, but I believe I understand.
You said, well, my problem with arguing with libertarians, but you don't even understand libertarian arguments.
I do.
Nobody's saying that there shouldn't be police. Nobody's saying that the government shouldn't protect rights, but the government should protect rights, not violate them. That's the argument.
Absolutely.
You have yet to make the case for what the difference is between you robbing someone personally or you voting for somebody to do it for you. You have not done that yet.
Let me explain the difference to you, all right?
Yes.
So when somebody takes my money in a robbery, I get nothing in return. When somebody takes my money to pave the road that I drive to work on, I get something in return. So the difference is that one is taking for their benefit and one is taking for my benefit. There you go.
So when the mafia compels people to pay for protection, those people are getting a benefit and that makes it okay.
No, because
why not? That was your claim just now. That was your claim.
Set the house on fire and then charge somebody to put out the fire.
That's what the government is doing.
That is absolutely not. They're taking my money so that they can maintain the roads that I drive to work on, so they can maintain the power grid, so they can maintain a police department. I get something in return that I want from government. And you want it. Nothing at all you want from government.
You want it. But the point is it's coercive and there's people that don't want it. And by the way, let me just say this. By the way,
do you not want electricity?
I don't want the government involved in it. Why does the government?
But my question was, do you want electricity? Yes or no?
Of course I want electricity. Well, I also want a ham sandwich.
What's the big deal about paying for it if you want it?
The problem is the government taxing people for it, forcing people to pay for it. That's the problem. I want a sandwich too. I don't want the government to force me to eat a ham sandwich.
Okay, but back to utilities for just a second, right? If you don't want to pay for electricity, you don't have to. You can turn off. There is no fee for you not paying for using electricity, and yet you choose to use it.
I choose to use it because I'm better off with it than without it.
But aren't you kind of coerced? Because without electricity, you can't do your podcast.
No, that's not coercion.
Well, how is that not coercion?
Why is it? Again,
you can't do your podcast.
Oh my God, dude, again, coercion is when people force other people to do things. That's coercion.
And so
not giving me something that I don't pay for is not coercion. No.
But giving you something that you use but don't want to pay for, because what you seem to be saying is, well, given the choice, I wouldn't have used this anyway, so I don't want to pay for it.
If you force me to pay for something that you're providing, then yes, it's coercion. It's coercion when the mafia does it. It's coercion when the government does it. It's coercion when anybody does it. If the guy comes and washes your windshield, he's provided you with a service. Does he now get to make you pay him for it?
Because you didn't ask for that service.
No, again.
But you did ask, but
I did not ask.
You absolutely asked for electricity.
Well, actually, I did not. Actually, I didn't ask for them. The roads are here, and I don't have the option to build my own roads. I don't have the option to seek private funding to build our own roads because the government would stop it. So it's all coercion all the way down.
It costs you billions of dollars.
Hold on. I cannot build any road I want. That's not true. That's false. That's false.
Enough money, you can buy property.
That's false. I could buy property. I could not build roads right away. It's not true.
Listen, I've been involved in startups for years. You can pay. You'd be surprised what you can pay the government to do if you have enough money.
Why? Okay, first of all, why should I be? We have Desert Eagle in the audience. I don't know what the hell what he's even talking about, but regardless of what he's talking about, my point of the matter again is this: it's simple, and you haven't answered it. You have never addressed it. That if somebody doesn't want something, should they be forced to pay for it? That's it.
And
Now
if they use it, they should be forced to pay for it.
So the government comes and builds this entire network of things that now my life and well-being depend upon.
Yep.
And in the meantime, they're taxing me for it. What I'm arguing is that the government should stop doing that, not just to me, to everybody. It's not a personal thing. It's not, I don't want it. And then the people who want it can pay for it. The people who don't. And if you don't pay for it, you can't use it. But your system, in addition to having the government requires people to pay for things, requires people to pay for things for other people to use as well. It's coercion in a double sense, in that it's forcing me to pay for it, for me and for those that can't afford it. But either way, it is coercion.
All right. So, and so my comment about the libertarians were, my challenge with talking to people of a libertarian bent is that they seem to think that there is some idealized society.
Real quickly, I just want to tell you, I've got about 15 minutes left, Blake. I don't want you to get caught up, and then it's like I'm cutting you off. I've got about
15 minutes. You said, or 5 minutes?
About 15. I can go 15.
Okay, yeah. But so my point, though, right, is that you keep talking about the libertarians often talk about this idealized world, much like, frankly, like the communists. I mean, the definition of communism was the reason we had to go through a period of socialism before communism was because we had the habits of capitalism that made us greedy and acquisitive, and a period of socialism would strip the greed out of us. And at that point, we could go back to a stateless society because we wouldn't need any rules. So both the libertarians and the communists have this fantasy of a stateless society where we wouldn't need any rules, and that's not the real world. And so
it's also a straw man, by the way.
Let me finish. My frustration with libertarians is instead of trying to actually make things better, they spend all of their time in this theoretical world complaining about the real world. Once again, not actually trying to improve anything.
Okay. First of all, I've never met a libertarian, which I'm not one. I've never even met an anarchist who thought there should be no rules. Never. I've never met anybody that advocated for what you just said. Not one single time. I've debated some of the top anarchists in the world, David Friedman, Walter Block, Michael Huemer. I've never one time come across somebody who said there should be no rules. Ever. Full stop.
Anarchists, you've come across anarchists to say that we still need a federal government.
No, you said rules, not federal government.
What rules do they think we need? What rules?
They think there should be They think there should be all types of rules governing behavior, governing the markets. They just think they should be privately regulated, not regulated by government. That's the first.
So who enforces those rules?
The second. Listen, I'm not going to start defending anarchists because I think they're wrong.
Fair enough.
I'm just telling you they want they don't advocate against rules. That's all I'm saying to you. The second thing is, as far as advocating for something that's not happening, you yourself are complaining because you want to have something happen that isn't currently happening. You want there to be what you call democratic capitalism. That's not currently happening. You want to implement it, right? I'm not saying that immediately that I would not advocate for any changes to society. I'm not saying that what I'm advocating is going to happen tomorrow. What I'm saying is that the way that you move towards an ideal is to establish an ideal. And then you have to work within the framework. For instance, right now, I think there should be a gold standard. That's not going to happen. So I would advocate, say, for a reformation of the Federal Reserve. I don't think you could abolish all taxation right now because the society is such that too many people are dependent on it. It's just the whole network is set up right now that's built on the government. So what I would argue for are tax cuts, decreases. Let's get the government out of as many things as we can. I'm putting forward the principle that initiating force is wrong, not to say we should abolish all these things immediately, just because what I'm advocating is to roll back taxation, roll back regulations because they are initiating force. You're advocating to increase these things. That's the point. Not that we're going to establish some ideal today. That's not going to happen.
So that's the libertarian answer is lower tax rates?
What do you mean I don't know. You're asking me libertarianism. Okay.
But
First of all, libertarianism is a broad thing.
The policy you would advocate is if we lower tax rates, that would make our country less coercive.
If you had less taxes, it would be less coercive, not more. Yeah.
And then what about the budget deficit?
Well, the problem is you also would have to cut spending, which they obviously, I mean, you want to talk about real world stuff. Nobody seems interested in doing it, no matter how much, mouthing they get, what's the word I'm looking for here? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand. So what spending?
How much they advocate it. Okay, I'm going to get this dude out of here because he's a dick. So you're leaving. I have a big problem with assholes. Like, I don't mind people commenting and I don't mind people disagreeing with me, but when they come in just to be dicks, it's like, you don't need to be a dick. Like, we're having a spirited debate. You're not being a dick
without calling anybody names or anything like that.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, I just, it's a real pet peeve of mine, especially when they do it hiding behind fake names. I just find it very cowardly. So he's gone. But anyways,
okay, booth. Yes. I heard that one occasionally.
Yeah, but
so real quick though, what is taxes are easy. What is a service that government does right now that you think government should not do?
First of all, if I was going to phase things back, you can't ultimately cut the budget deficit if you didn't scale back Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. It's not good. You could do that. You could also scale back military spending, which I'm all for. So if you were to to start cutting those, and also it's not automatic that when you cut taxes that you get less revenues, because in the 80s, I think 7 out of 8 years or 6 out of 8 years after Reagan cut taxes, revenues actually went up. But you would have to cut some things. You could start to cut through Social Security. You could cut Medicare. You could cut Medicaid.
Yeah,
and I think these things should.
But those are actually not part of the operating budget. Medicare is paid for by a dedicated tax. Social Security is paid for by a dedicated tax. So
no, you're saying they're. Wait, hold on. There's a word. Hold on a second. 1 second. They're non. This is why I got to cut back. My brain's falling out on me. But there's parts of the budget that are negotiable and parts that aren't. What's the word I'm looking for?
I know what you're talking
discretionary about. Spending. Discretionary. Yeah, they're non-discretionary, but they're made non-discretionary by Congress. But they could be made discretionary.
Yeah, they're by statute, but on a different topic, they're paid for by specific taxes. So looking at the actual operations of the government, putting aside social services, what is an operation of government that you think we should not do?
Not do? Oh, well, there's a lot.
What should government not do? Putting aside Social Security, what should we not do?
Well, okay, let's say this. I don't think the government should be involved in education at all. Full stop.
No public education.
I also don't think that you could implement that today, because there's a lot of kids that are dependent on it, that they've been paying taxes. The schools have been built with taxes. Teachers' salaries have been built with taxes. So you would have to scale it back. You couldn't just annihilate these things overnight. It doesn't work that way.
But that would be a long-term goal for you, would be to end public education.
Sure. Yeah. My long-term goal would be to end
government ownership. You want that gone, right?
My long-term goal would be. Wow, we've got a lot of liberals in the audience. That's the rare thing. They must have come to see you. But anyway, that's cool. I mean, that's fine. No, I love it. I think everybody should come in as long as they're respectful. It's great. I would strip government responsibility down to the protection of the lives, liberty, and property of the citizens. There would be police force, national defense, and courts of law. The military, police, courts of law. That's basically it. I wouldn't do that tonight. Because I don't think you can do it tonight. So I would work towards it.
No food safety.
Say that again?
No food safety. No FDA, anything like that. No USDA.
No.
No customs to make sure tainted products don't come into our country.
No.
No federal highway system.
No.
No federal control of the airspace.
I would say that there could be rules regarding it. For instance, because if you're making rules to stop crashes, like in your case on the highway, there might be some room for that. You know what I mean? I'm not, I haven't thought every detail out of everything. My goal would be to minimize and get rid of coercion. So that would be up there. But there's things, let me just say this though, that I would imagine that even within the principles that you advocate, there's room for disagreement. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like for instance, among people who advocate for individual rights, there's disagreement about things like intellectual property. I'm an advocate for intellectual property. Some people aren't. You know what I mean? There's still things that are debatable.
Lots of
So in the case of the airspace, there's still room for disagreement and argument, and I don't really know where I am on that. I've never thought about that issue.
Well, let me ask you a question: Would an airline that didn't follow the rules, would that be justification for coercing them to follow the rules?
It would depend. If you could show that they were violating the rights of other plane companies, then I would say yes, because they're violating rights. I just haven't thought through it to see if it's actually violating rights. I haven't done that. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
Real world example: Deepwater Horizon down in the Gulf of Mexico.
Sure.
Right, and there's a term in economics called an involuntary risk market. That's when you didn't realize you were at risk of an activity. Okay. Right. So Deepwater Horizon, there's supposed to be a special kind of shutoff valve in case something happened, and they were not installing that valve. Would it have been right for the federal government to coerce them to actually put in place the right valve? Or were we better off not coercing them to put that into place and letting the free market respond by destroying thousands of businesses who then sued whoever that was?
Okay. So in the case of, for instance, people that are negligent, like let's say that the Deepwater Horizon people are negligent.
Well, they didn't follow a rule. Right. That's what they did. They weren't coerced and they didn't follow it.
Okay. There's nothing in a free market society that says that companies, for instance, have the right to dump pollutants into a stream, because the argument can be made that they're violating the rights of other people directly by poisoning their water supply. Similarly, in the case of the Deepwater Horizon, I think I remember it, but I'm not positive. There's something happened and there was a leak into the water. Okay. Well, that company should definitely be held liable. And if they did it with, a forethought where they knew that this was a substantial risk, then I would put them in jail.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, we don't put legal persons in jail. We only put living, breathing persons.
No. What I'm saying is that if you have CEOs that are making decisions where they know, for instance, that a gas tank on a car explodes and they put that car out into the market, I would put them in prison for it.
Okay. So you think coercion is acceptable to enforce a rule if not enforcing that rule might harm another person?
I think retaliatory force is okay. So if you put in a rule that's meant to defend the rights of somebody, to defend against aggression, which what we're talking about would be aggression, then that I have no issue with that. I have no issue at all with rules that are protecting rights. I have an issue with rules that violate rights.
Okay, but it gets back to that gray area, because
there's edge cases. I don't disagree that there's edge cases. Yeah. I don't disagree with you at all.
I would say that most of society is an edge case.
Most
of society involved in agreement at some point from some group of people. The rest of us get born into it. We've got the chance to try and change the tax code. Plenty of, here in Missouri, they just got rid of the capital gains tax, which is personally lunacy, but it is what it is. But my point is that in our democratic units, we do have the ability to change tax code if we want. Does that make it coercive on the people that don't? It is
like coercive, yeah. Taxation is always and everywhere coercive.
Yes. Even if people voted for
it. And if everybody voted for it, then
100% of people voted for it is not coercive. Any other thing else is coercive.
If you are ever taking somebody's money without their consent, yes, it's coercive.
If you are forcing somebody to pay for something they're using without them wanting to pay.
Again, you're forcing them to pay for something that they're using that you forced somebody else to pay to build.
No, that's somebody else voluntarily chose to build.
No,
we as a nation got together and voted on a highway system.
We as a nation did no such thing. First of all, at the time, okay. So what about all the women at the time that couldn't vote?
Good point. Absolutely. The circle of freedom has continued to expand.
Okay. Did they get together and vote for the highway system?
No.
And that's not including all the people that voted against it. That's just people that weren't even allowed to vote.
Fair point. But the people that were allowed to vote, and I do believe that women had voting in the 1950s, unless I'm missing something.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking the ICC. The 1950s, yes, women had the right to vote.
But so my point, though, is that this is the complexity of society, is that virtually everything done in society was at some point done through a democratic action that had majority support. Future generations
that's not true, no.
What's
That's
an
not
example
true,
of something in the U.S. society that didn't have majority support?
Trail of Tears.
Okay, that's a tough one. I can't necessarily come back on that one. You got a good one there. But that was also a fairly specific situation. There was broad support for relocating Native Americans to less valuable land. Right?
Not on the part of the Native Americans.
Not on the part of the Native Americans. Fair
how
point.
about let's take the adoption of the United States Constitution for starters.
Yeah.
And I'm a constitutionalist, by the way, but that doesn't change the fact that there were rules already in place, democratically voted for under the Articles of Confederation, that said they could not change those unless all 13 states agreed. And then people went and met in Philadelphia and changed it to 9 states had to agree, not 13 states had to agree.
Yeah, but
so they changed the rules, and they did so undemocratically. So
okay, wait.
It's been coercion from the start.
It wasn't coercion because those states did not have to join the union, especially at that time. If they had chosen not to participate in the United States, they had the option of doing so. They could have said, sorry, we don't want to be part of it.
Blake, they had already joined the union, and their contract said it could not be changed unless everybody agreed.
And the contract was voided, and they could have left.
The contract was violated, not voided.
No,
it was violated.
Well, first of all, they had the option of leaving the union. They did not have. We were a country that was 5 years old at that point. They absolutely could have said,
wasn't it the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union?
What's that?
It was the Articles of Confederation and Perpetual Union.
Yeah, but how long had it been in existence? 5 years, right? 4 or 5
I wouldn't care if it was in existence for a week. They agreed to a rule, and then they broke it.
Under contract law, if somebody breaks the contract, if somebody violates the provision of a contract, you've got the right to void the contract. So those states,
and what was their recompense?
What did it cost them to join that?
There was nothing. There was nothing that they could do. The point I'm trying to make.
They absolutely could have not joined. It didn't cost them anything to sign the Articles of Confederation, so there was no harm. They absolutely could have walked away at that point and said, "You know what? We're going to go it alone." But none of them did so because
hold on a second. There was harm. There was harm. They didn't do so because it was at the point where there was no other choice. The big states had already signed on and they were hit. But beyond that, at the time, only males could vote.
Yep.
Right. And not even all males could vote. Blacks certainly were excluded. Yep. Native Americans were excluded. White males could vote.
Understood.
Right. So this thing was
people that were allowed to vote. Literally, any state could have left the union at that point. They could have said, "We're not."
That's fine, but the point I'm trying to make to you is there was never a situation where people weren't being coerced, where people weren't being forced against their will.
Recognizing that it's a larger conversation about the circle of freedom, and as you say,
sure.
in 1790.
Listen, I would argue, Blake, and I have with anarchists, that the adoption of the Constitution actually increased freedom.
I would agree.
I'm not arguing that it never increases freedom. What I'm saying is that the principles that are embedded in the Declaration of Independence, the principles that were adopted from John Locke, the principles that I adhere to, the ethic that I adhere to, says that the initiation of force is wrong.
Okay,
and it doesn't matter.
Okay. Yes or no? Could those countries? So we all agree on the Articles of Confederation. It's not working very well.
No, I don't agree on those either. I don't think they were good either.
Going back
that's not my point. My point was they were violating the agreement. That's it.
They're violating the agreement. And at that point, any state had the ability to say, no, we're not going to sign on the Constitution. We're going to go to our own. They had the physical option to do that. They could have opted out. Instead, they opted in.
They could not keep, though, the contract that they had already agreed to.
The contract was going to be ended. But
they could not do that.
But wait, with contracts, right? You look at obligations. There were virtually no obligations for the states in that contract. There were virtually
mutual defense.
Benefit. What's that?
Mutual defense.
Yeah, a little bit of mutual defense, but the Articles of Confederation
that they would have to give up if they got out of that.
They would have to give up having other people defend them.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
That's the only thing.
Yeah. But that was part of it.
Yeah. But my point, though, is that they looked at the options on the horizon, one of which was we lose our mutual defense. Who knows what happens on the economic side, or we can.
These other states will invade us.
You really think that other states would have invaded?
Yeah. Why not?
Why? I mean,
I don't know. There was a civil war where states invaded other states. Why wouldn't it have happened then over differences?
well, it happened over one difference in the Civil War, obviously.
Well, it wasn't just one difference, but there was a major
primarily one
difference.
difference. It was one big difference. With lots of little things came to that. But
Okay.
my point,
All
though,
right.
is that,
Okay. I'm going to let you wrap up, but I do have to get going. So
yeah. And I want to say I really appreciate the conversation. Social media is frustrating sometimes because there's part of the population that really does think the answer is just to talk more loudly. So while we haven't agreed on everything, or probably even many things, it has been a great conversation and an intellectual conversation, and based on facts and blah 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 and back and forth. So thank you very much for the opportunity to do that.
And thank you for doing it too. And I get excited during discussions, but I much prefer this than I do going back and forth on social media. I just don't like it. I like this. So Blake, tell people where they can find you if you want them to find you.
My name is Blake Ashby. BlakeAshby.org is my website. @Blake Ashby is TikTok. I do have a book coming out in the first quarter called Socialism, Capitalism, and the Future of the Democratic Party, the Case for Moderated Capitalism. So yeah, please follow me on TikTok or on Facebook. And then somewhere down the road, I'll have all of this in a nice little bundle. It talks about Marxian theory and everything else. And I'd love to come back and talk about it, Michael.
I'll tell you what, when you get your book written, let me know, and I will absolutely bring you. I would probably bring you on my other show. That's where I do interviews, The Rational Egoist, but I'd be happy to. Just let me know, and I'll bring you on.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much, Blake. And audience, thank you so much as well. We'll see you tomorrow at 12 o'clock.